Shalom. This story is about when I decided to ignore very good advice and decided to go ahead where fools would go and angels fear to tread. Okay. Uh, when we lived in Alabama and I homeschooled my children, and one of the homeschool moms had a daughter who had just turned 13. So my children were somewhere between 13 and 15 and wanted, for us to go to the skating rink on a Sunday. And so we said that we would go. And the skating rink was in Meridian, Mississippi, about 50 miles from where we lived in Clinton, Alabama. And I had no idea to skate. Okay, I was going to just sit and watch because some years earlier, maybe I don't know, 15, maybe even more than that years, about 20 years earlier, the church that I belonged to had a skating party. And at that time, Floyd was working midnights and he had come home and he was in bed, and I was getting ready to go out to the skating park. It was an afternoon skating party, early morning, but by probably 11 o'clock or something like that. And so the last thing he said to me is, Sharon, you ought to wear your bicycle helmet. I don't need no helmet on it, you know. So I'm going. But I'm going to tell you this. He was right because by the time that afternoon was over, I had 4 or 5 stitches in above on my eyebrow because I had fallen. And when he got to the hospital, he was so sweet. But I know it must have took everything in him to not say, "I told you so." Okay, so skating, that it wasn't even in my, nowhere in my thoughts. Okay, now back to this Sunday morning when we arrived at the rink. Winston said he didn't want to skate, but before we left home, I told him, I said, bring your socks just in case you decide otherwise, because he had a sports game later on that week, and he didn't want to mess up his leg just in case he fell. I thought it was more, he didn't want to be embarrassed in front of the other homeschool children if he did fall. Okay, teens, they weren't children, they were all youth. And so when we got there, they had something I had never seen before. They had these rolling walkers that were made out of PVC pipe, and it was like a V that you could put yourself into, and then you hold on to the sides of it, and you could skate. Okay, so this was a game changer for me. So and I liked the thrill of propelling myself through space. Okay, so I decided I'm gonna skate. Okay, but I didn't have any socks, okay? And let me also tell you now, I was never a skater. And even when I was young and remember Uncle Isaac would take a bunch of us cousins and we would go skating. I didn't know how to skate. My daddy would take me to skate. I didn't know how to skate, okay? But so I figured if I get a hold of one of these walkers, I'm gonna be able to skate. So I think now I need some socks, okay? Because I wasn't putting my bare feet in skating shoes. And I don't know whose feet been in the skating shoes. Okay. So I go to Winston. I said, go to the car and bring me your socks. And he said, Mama, what for? I said, I'm going to skate. I said, no, you're not. Bring me the socks. Okay, so while he's going to get the socks, I go to the counter and ask for skates. And they tell me they run big, and so they give me a 7, and so they look big, but I said, "Well, let me try them and see." Okay, now this is the second witness that my mind was starting to go because I put a bare foot in that skate. I put it on my right foot because my left foot earlier that week I had some surgery on my toe. It wasn't in a bandage, and it was healing pretty nicely. But the last thing I should have been doing. Okay. So that's when I say, yeah, well, I need a size 6. Okay. So I go to find Winston. I'm looking around for him. And so I see him and I said, well, give me the socks. He said, I don't have any extra in the car. I said, I told you to bring socks. He said, I did, but I put them on. I said, take them off and give me those socks. He said, these are my baseball socks, and they're too skinny to fit your legs. Then he rolls up his pants leg. See, they don't fit you. I said, take them off. I'll wear them pushed down on my legs. He said, okay, okay. He said, but this thing not going to turn out good. Now, I ain't want to hear that because I ain't paying no attention to it. And Floyd overheard the conversation. And Floyd, lay back. He said, well, Sharon, do you know where the nearest hospital located just in case we need it? So I totally did not acknowledge that. Floyd wouldn't have made a scene and he wasn't going to stop me because he figured I'm grown and I'm going to do what I want to do. And he wasn't relying on me to drive to get us back home. Okay. So do what you want to do. Do what you feel like you got to do. Okay. So hesitatingly, I went out on the floor because I had found an abandoned walker. The straightaways were a breeze, but the curves were a challenge because I did, but I would get better each time I went around. But I didn't know how to cross over my feet to make to turn. But I kept sweating. I mean, I kept skating, and I worked up a little sweat. But then I was getting into the zone. So it was getting a little bit better for me. I pulled over to the edge after I got out there, and I was only adult from the homeschool group that was out there on the floor skating. Okay, so I kind of waved at them, and Floyd just yelled, "Be careful! You looking good out there!" And Winston just shook his head. So I went back on the floor, and I was skating with this newfound freedom. The curves got easier, and I had figured I'd master the crossover stuff, on my next skating trip. Okay, and the biggest challenge right now was to avoid the little children some of them who had fallen on the floor. So you got to kind of jig and jag around them. About 10 minutes on the floor, and I was halfway through the end curve, and I had to swerve to miss one of the little children who had fallen, and my skate slipped from under me and down I went and I hit the floor so hard. And that floor is hard, this skating floor. And hit on my right hip. But it was nothing to keep me from skating. A couple of people rushed over and they helped me up. So I went over to where the homeschool group was, and I told them, I said, I'm all right. But none of them was even paying any attention to me. They didn't even see me fall. Okay. So my pride might have been hurt a little bit, but I found a new, deeper freedom because I could skate in my own world without the distraction of thinking that other people were looking at me. People that knew me was looking at me. So I rolled back onto the floor and they're playing YMCA. Okay, so I'm getting in and I'm throwing my hands up off the walker. You passing by Floyd. He's looking, he's shaking his head. And so um, for the next 10 minutes, I was like back in my youthful days, even better, because I didn't really know how to skate. So I adopted the Eagles mantra: fly like an eagle, let the spirit carry me. And I actually got, the little knee dip that you do and the sway with the beat of the music. And then Stevie Wonder came on. My eyes don't cry no more. And the artificial smoke came down for the ceiling. The colors was going, and the disco ball. I mean, I was no longer in the zone. I was zoned out. All right. So I sailed into a curve, and that was when Al Green was "Let's Stay Together" was on. And I couldn't feel no pain. I was free as a bird. I was light as a butterfly, bright as the noonday sun. But when I rounded that curve, I swerved to miss a small boy, and my right leg twisted at the knee and went out from under me. I fell hard on that twisted leg, and when I looked at it, that it was in a position that no normal leg should be in. The only leg that should ever be in that position is if you had a doll baby with the connection at the knee where you could twist the leg. Okay. I just knew I had broken it, and I had. At that point, my dream crashed. I was immobilized. I was heavy as a buffalo, and darkness had taken over my thoughts. Okay. So they don't have stretchers or anything there. And so they did um, get me into a wheeling chair. And one of the homeschool moms was a nurse. And so they took me to the hospital because nobody was thinking maybe that I had broken it, maybe it just twisted it or something like that. Now, a funny thing that did happen when we got up there, and my leg was really broken, is that when I was trying to explain to the intake person that I was skating on a walker. Okay, so she notices that I'm I don't like to say that, but at that time I was getting ready. I was a month before I turned 64. Okay, and so there was a disconnect between the intake worker, the triage nurse, the emergency nurse, and then the doctor. Okay, so when the doctor came in, he was saying that I didn't need crutches because I could use my walker. You know, then we had to straighten the situation out, and we all had a laugh because people would wonder why would I get out there on the skate rink and walk, and why would Floyd be foolish enough to let his elderly wife get out on the skating rink with a walker? Okay, so anyway, then there's another follow-up story at some other time when I'll tell you about that. But I did break my leg, and I had to have a pin in it. All right, and this brings to mind to me Proverbs 9:12. If thou be wise, thou shalt be wise for thyself. Okay. But if you scorneth, and that means scorneth the wisdom that's given to you, shared with you, advice is shared to you, thou alone shall bear it. And I did. And I thank Father that He got me through it. And so that now I can walk. Well, I've been walking for years since then, but with no um, semblance that I've ever had a broken leg. So please like and share and subscribe if you haven't. Shalom.